So we'd start out and try to go someplace, different things, and I would take them to the merry-go-round, and I took them different places. And as I'd sit there while they rode the merry-go-round, did all these things, sit on a bench, eating peanuts, I felt that there should be something built, some kind of an amusement enterprise built where the parents and the children could have fun together. It all started from a daddy with two daughters wondering where he could take them, where he could have a little fun with them too.
Is your birthday coming? Okay. You could go anywhere. Where would you want to go? Why don't we go?
Okay.
Now. Today. I'm being serious.
Are you going?
We're leaving today to go to Disneyland.
Are you joking?
No, I'm not joking.
Are we done?
Yes, we're going. I love you.
I didn't mean to.
There are certain things that we look forward to that bring joy into our life. We have holidays and birthdays and parties and friendships. And I think, amongst them are experiences in our Disney parks. People really look forward to that. That's something that they can share together. That's something that they can spend time together doing. It's Disneyland. It's more than a place. It's a feeling. It's an experience. So it's permission to be a kid for an adult. It's permission to not to worry about homework or any challenge that you may have as a kid.
There's a child in all of us, and Walt Disney, he knew that, and he understood the importance of that in not losing the qualities of that child as you go through life and as you get older. And the child is that secret to optimism, to hope, to fun, to just really seeing how amazing the world is.
The common spirit of the groups of people that come together to do this is a clear sense of the opportunity that we have to do extraordinary things, but to do things that have great impact upon people.
We all here have a passion for creating experiences and sharing that with people and sharing the challenges and the opportunities to create that. I think that's sort of the special bond that all the Imagineers find interesting and unique ways to really sort of achieve some very special moments for our guests.
We're making happiness in kids and families and many people's lives all around the world. The stories we tell and the experiences we create become part of the family memories for millions of people. And so in some small way, each and every one of us is part of each of our guests' lives and making them a little better, a little happier.
We want to create something that's going to touch people emotionally in some ways, and they're going to go, wow, that was so great, I want to go back again, I want to tell my friends, and they're going to go back and they're going to tell their friends. And how do we do that? Creating something that makes them laugh or think or cry.
I think Imagineering has really stayed pretty much the same in the creative process. We do it with love, we do it with heart, we do it with soul. And we also create these all-inclusive experiences that you can visit, enjoy, and forget about your worries and troubles for the day.
Walt was a storyteller. He saw that the guests that would come in there, they are literally walking into a movie. And that means everything you put in that park, right down to the tiniest details, the whole thing has to make cohesive sense.
We have a history. We have our Disney DNA. We have the history of all of our characters and our stories. And so we're starting to create new experiences.
The kind of experiences that we create in our theme parks are experiences that people from around the world love to enjoy. The notion that Walt had of a place where parents and children could have fun together applies anywhere in the world.
Who doesn't want their kids to grow up to be good people? Who doesn't want you to look at the world through the lens of unconditional love and standing up for what's right?
If we look at telling this story in other places around the world, let their stories speak for themselves. We are sort of a beautiful blank canvas. They're the paint. Together, those two things marry and become a masterpiece.
It's really amazing to consider that 60 years ago, Walt Disney Imagineering started as a small group of people in just a few buildings, and that gave rise to everything that Disney Parks and Resorts is around the world today.
I mean, you think about this, there's 11 parks around the world, and basically you go into them and people are
acting or reacting the same way. That is really a tribute to something that spread all over the world.
I mean, you look at everything that we've done and throughout the Disney organization, it's like a true fairy tale.
Kids and adults alike are losing sleep tonight because they're going to go to a Disney park tomorrow.
From our cruise ships to our hotels to New Fantasyland to our expansion projects around the world, it really has been an extraordinary 60-year journey, and I think Walt would be very proud. The best part is, we're just getting started.
Sorry, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for coming this early. If you were expecting the Fab Five, you're in the wrong place because there's only 4 of us. And they are fab, I'll tell you that. So I'd like to introduce my fellow panelists. First, the inimitable designer of vehicles for Disneyland and so much more, Robert Bob Gurr. What happened to her? Right there. And next, the wonderful designer of costumes from pirates to small world figures and so much more, Alice Davis. His name begins with X. The wonderful songwriter, writer, and artist, Extencio. Brought his own bicycle. So, of course, we all had the opportunity. First of all, I'd like to say 60 years of Imagineering. Isn't that wonderful? And we're also proud to be here representing the traditions that Walt established, and many of us worked and continue to work to uphold. So our subject this morning, of course, is working with Walt, which we all had the opportunity to do. And I thought we would start with asking each of our panelists to tell us about the first meeting they ever had with Walt. What was the project and subject, and What do you remember clearly about him from that meeting? Alice?
My first meeting with Walt was an interesting one because Mark and I had just gotten married, and we'd bought a house, and I was cleaning the paint off the wall and wood, and I was taking the wallpaper down and so on. And I called Mark and I said, "I'm so tired today, you're going to have to take me to dinner." So he took me to the tam o' shanter. And we were sitting there about to order a drink, and who should walk up but Walt Disney, but I didn't know it. He came up from behind me. And he saw this hand go on Mark's shoulder, and he said, "Is this your new bride?" And I looked up, and it was Walt Disney, and I almost swallowed the glass. He said, "What type of work do you do?" And I said, "Well, I was in the garment industry, and I was making brassieres and girdles, and I know all about elastic." I said, "I now control the American woman by elastic." So he sat down, and he was fascinated. He knew nothing about elastic, and he wanted to know everything. And I think for about a half an hour, he was asking me questions about elastic. Mark finally bought him a drink. So anyway, he was all excited about knowing about elastic, and he was going to go tell other people about elastic. And he was always thinking about elastic when he looked at me, I think. So anyway, he started to walk away. He said goodbye, he started to walk away, and then he turned around and he said, "You're going to work for me someday." And 2.5 years later, I got a phone call from his secretary, and she said, "Walt wants to know if you do the costumes for Small World." And I said, "What up?" So I was told to be there at 9 o'clock the next morning. I was there at 8. And I got the job, and I've never been happier in my life than that job.
Yeah, we're happy you got the job. Bob, you were...
I have one tiny bit more.
I couldn't stop you.
I was born during the Depression, and I didn't have a doll like all the other little girls. They had Shirley Temple dolls and Didi dolls and all these, and I was lucky to have a roof over my head and some clothes. So anyway, my friends wouldn't let me hold their dolls or anything. They were, it's mine. So I made a rag doll for myself finally, and that was my doll. So I was always sorry that I didn't have the dolls, but when I lined up all those dolls and I got to do all of the costumes, I thought, I've got more dolls than that.
Something really in common with Alice, because my friends wouldn't let me hold their dolls either. Bob, you were intent on being a car designer, I believe, when you first met Walt.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
As you know, Walt had us working on Saturdays, and starting in 1954. He would pay us for 5 days, but expected us to work for 6. You can't do that today, but that's how we got the work done, as extra days. There on a second week of October 1954, I had started to make some sketches for an Utopia car, and they walked me out to the back lot, and there was a little chassis of a car, 4 wheels, no body, so I kind of knew what they wanted. And as you know, when guys stand around and talk about cars, there's a tire, so you walk up and you put your foot on the tire, and then you put your elbow down on like that. And there was a spare wheel left out of 3 out of the 4. And this guy walks up, unshaven, looked a little on the ratty side, I remember he had a Roy Rogers belt with a little painted silver bullets in it, and a funny little short tie with a funny little symbol on it. And he was just talking away, and then he walked off, and as he walked off, everybody said, "Okay, see you, Walt." And I thought, oh my God, that's Walt Disney. Saturday morning, unshaven. I thought he was the father of one of the night guards. So I never met him. it was common in those days. Everybody he just worked with everybody, and nothing more was said.
That was it.
That was it.
All right, we'll get more from you later. Ed, you were a farm boy from Colorado, as I remember, right?
That's right. The two of us came from Colorado. One of them came from Rockefort toward the Mellon country, and I was in the coal mine district. And we had two kids from Colorado, and it was quite an exciting career start. I started as the usual in-betweener in the animation department, and I never dreamed I'd ever even get to know Walt. But I met one day in the elevator, and I said, "Good morning, Walt, how are you?" And he said, "Hey, X, you're just doing great." And I said, "My God, he knows my name." And then I almost fell on my hands and knees and said, "The great man knows my name." And then the career went on, and then a few more years before the Army took me. And, excuse me. But I was lucky enough to start all over again after Uncle Sam got through with me.
We'll get into some of that later, where we transferred you from animation to narrating. So we'll get into some of those stories. So I think, do you have a personal favorite? Well, I should say where I started. First time I met Walt Disney, I was hired to put out a tabloid newspaper at Disney. I was about to be the editor of the Daily Bruin at UCLA. And thank you. All the Trojan fans, leave now, please. And I started in mid-June 1955, a month before Disneyland opened. And 2 weeks after I went to work, I had to present the concept for this newspaper, which was going to be sold on Main Street at Disneyland for 10 cents. I had to present it to the Walt Disney. And I was 21 years old, had never worked professionally, and had just finished my junior year at UCLA. And believe me, I was scared as hell. I mean, here was Walt Disney, and I was making a presentation to him. And I always tell people that was the turning point in my career, because if Walt didn't like what I was doing, I was out the door before I ever got started. But fortunately, he liked it, and that led to the next half century, basically, after I finished my last year at UCLA. But the thing is, I couldn't figure out how he had time for this little thing I was doing. I mean, figure it out. 10 cents this newspaper was going to sell for on Main Street. It took me a long time, and I finally realized what it was. And that was that for Walt, Main Street was a real place. And every town, 1890, 1900, had at least one newspaper. So for Walt, it was part of the story, and a missing tooth, if you will, from the story if it didn't have that newspaper. What is it that we all remember and try to do when we're creating things for the parks? It's that detail, story detail. And it's so in depth that he taught us that and emphasized that. And I think that's why the parks are what they are. So I'm going to go to Bob this time. Do you have a personal favorite project that Walt assigned you to do? What was it, and why was it your favorite?
Yeah, that's like asking me 250 projects, over 100 of them were for Disney, and it's like you want me to pick my best grandchild.
Yes, that's what I asked you.
No, because really, all the things that Walt had us doing, every one of them was absolutely fantastic project, whether it was a small one or a big one. But I think the one that tickled him pink the most was the fact that he actually got an animated Abraham Lincoln to work. And I saw later, after we'd done the project, that, wow, this was really, really a risky thing to do because, as you know, when we had animation starting here at Disneyland in the opening days, we had a simple thing like, and which is still there, there's an Indian on a horse, and it had an electric motor that would run it, and early animation was sort of like, and that was the extent of it. But by going into the World's Fair, starting in 1963, working on the Lincoln, Walt had a shop team working on a Lincoln for about a year, and the darn thing just did not work. So he had Roger Brody and myself take a look at it, and I immediately saw that, I saw a technical reason why it was not going to work, and I had a little bit different idea. And I could tell that Walt was quite irritated when he showed me this Lincoln, because it was in front of a wall, and to get it to work correctly, there was guys behind the wall helping Lincoln get up out of the chair, and which was fake, you know. And it was hydraulic and was using red fluid. And apparently the night before, a cylinder broke in the chest, and a hydraulic red fluid came out on the shirt. And apparently it was when Walt had a lady friend there and was showing it to him, and she was horrified, and she said, "Well, how dare you reenact the killing of Lincoln?" But the look on Walt's face told me all I needed, because both eyebrows were up this time. He should have one. And I remember him looking at that thing, and he says, "Bobby, I want half as much weight, and I want twice as much motion, and I don't want anything to move at the top. Lincoln is very tall, and it can't wiggle around." And he says, "I have animators. They come back from lunch drunk, and I know which one's been drinking, because they wiggle at the top." And I remember this was a very, very vivid instruction as to the integrity of this mechanical machine. You know, a 6 foot tall guy. But we got going on it, and I was busy on 3 other projects, New York World's Fair, so I took time out, it was not only 90 days to think and figure out the whole darn mechanism for the Lincoln and the equipment on the floor that would make it work. And not until I saw the Lincoln figure actually at the New York World's Fair, I could see what a profound thing this was. I mean, if it was Grover Cleveland, I could have gotten all the parts inside. But Abraham Lincoln was such a skinny guy, you know, and he had to stuff all these parts in the side and have all the motion. But I could see the emotion that it did to people. I mean, even me, it's still very hard to talk about today. But again, the look on Walt's face when it worked. The eyebrows were down, the smile was up and everything. And that left me with a great impression that Walt had an idea, was working on it, it didn't work, raised his voice a little bit, we found a design that did work, and he was just happier than a clam. He had something that nobody else in the world had, and he had it first.
And this is something Blaine Gibson talked about all the time. Walt wanted reality. He wanted to make sure that nobody thought of that figure as a robot, but it was Lincoln. And the words were, in order for the words to have the most meaning, it had to feel like it was coming from the man.
Well, I'll tell you how he did that. You know, Walt would, he'd have you do one thing, but he actually had 2 other things he wanted out of you, but he didn't really let you know that. He kind of did that to everybody. But backing up just a little bit, as soon as I got started in the actual project, about a week into it, he said, "Well, Bobby, would it make sense if we had an actor come in and we'll dress him up like Lincoln and we'll rig up some mirrors so in one shot you'll have pictures of how Lincoln would move, and then you can take that clip and you can run it on a Moviola machine, you know, which is the machine that has a little screen you can trace over, and you can put body joints in. And I thought, oh, that's a cool idea. So a couple of days later, he had me come over to the studio on a Saturday morning, and here's this little setup, and here's this mirror, and here's a camera, one guy to run the camera, one guy to run the audio, and Royal Dano, the actor, and then Walt and myself. That's all there is in the whole stage on Saturday morning. And he gave a script to Royal Dano, and I thought the guy did a really good job on his first take. And then Walt jumped up and says, no, now you do that over. And I saw the poor actor just sort of shrug, and he did a second take. And a second take I thought was pretty sloppy. And then Walt, again, jumped up and he says, no, I want you to do it again. And then I remember the guy went like, and then he did the worst take of the bunch. At the end of that, Walt gets up, but we're sitting on half apple boxes on the floor, and he gets up and he starts leading us in the Battle of the Republic. Only he in his mind knew that you remember that scene in New York World's Fair, all of a sudden the sky turned into the American flag. Walt knew that's what he was going to do. The trick was, he got a very tired, worn out Abraham Lincoln, and the actor Royal Dano didn't know it, I didn't know it, but Walt knew what he was getting, and it was done under a bunch of subterfuge to get me a moviola clip. That's the way he works.
So Alice, I have a hunch that either one of two projects was your favorites. Maybe both of them were your favorites. And tell us what they were and why.
I mean, going from small little children to do the old man.
That was quite a transition, wasn't it? Was one of them your favorite?
Of course, the dog. I never had one. Boy, I got all I wanted. I always say if you wait long enough, you'll finally get it.
But you know, the beautiful thing about it is you were working with Mark and you were working with Mary Blair.
Yes. We couldn't ask for better.
Absolutely.
And that was another joy because I had admired Mary Blair from the time I was young. I think I was around 12 when my mother introduced me to Mary's work. So I was, my mother was an art teacher, and a damn good one. And she was the one she admired the most was Mary Blair. She loved her colors, she loved her design, everything. And I was, my mother loved Chouinard Art Institute. And she wanted to be able to go there, but she wasn't able to, but I won a scholarship to it. She was very proud of that. And I was very proud to become a good friend of Mrs. Chouinard. And she liked what I did, and she gave me a full 4-year scholarship. So I have to say this about Mr. Lincoln, though, before I forget. When they put Lincoln in, the Japanese pavilion was next door. And they were giving away, what are the little round ball bearings to anybody who wanted it. And so everybody was filling their pockets with ball bearings. And when they'd come to see Mr. Lincoln, they'd wait to get to the Japanese pavilion first and get the ball bearings. And then they would throw them at Lincoln, especially when he stood up in this, because they thought it was a real person. And they were waiting for him to scream when they hit him with the ball bearings. But the worst thing that happened to that was when the men went up to see if he had been damaged, and make sure he was working correctly, they would slip on these ball bearings. They were all over the stage, and they were taking terrible falls and getting hurt. So I gave them the information, don't pick your foot up, just slide it. And you go between the ball bearings.
You were the art director of the stage.
Right. But anyway.
Tell us what kind of things Walt asked you to do with the costuming.
Oh, well, I was used to being in the manufacturing. But at Chouinard, you also learned you had to graduate. You had to be able to do children's clothes, women's clothing, and men's tailoring, and you had to be able to make all the patterns to fit. You had to be able to do the finished garment, and then you could get your diploma. Well, people like to get me because they got somebody who could do 3 jobs for one. So I could go from children to men to women to whatever.
Brassieres,
girdles, the works. So, and all kinds of elastic, and the elastic came in pretty well with some of the figures to keep them from falling apart and such. But anyway, I went to, when Walt came by to see how things were going, I said, I haven't received any information of how much I'm allowed for each doll for buttons and clothes, you know, the fabrics and so on. And when eyebrow went up, he was kind of disappointed with me, and he said, Alice, he said, we have a building over there filled with people that do the pencil work. He said, you're to design the best costume that any woman from the age of 1 to 100 would love to have herself, have the doll and have it just as beautiful as possible. And he said, they're going to figure out where you're going to get the money.
And he did. All those costumes are fantastic.
And he said, do you know why? And I said, I know you like nothing but the best. And he said, that's right. He said, I want to give everybody more than they expect. And they'll come back. And they'll trust you.
I'll clap for that even now.
And he said, if you cheat them, you'll never see hide nor hair of them again.
That was it. We all knew that. So
the other thing was that when you worked with him, you had a lot of people working with you, and your neck was on the line for what you told them to do and how it was to be done. But he would come and see you personally, and he would talk to you about what you were doing, what you were designing, and so forth, and he would say, that sounds good, let's do that, and when will you have it planned for me? And I'll say, well, maybe next Wednesday? And he said, yes, next Wednesday at 2 o'clock. He would never write anything down, but he was there Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and you better be there. But that was because of, you were just seeing him, but they were all hearing what was going on. But we didn't have all kinds of meetings and such that went on all the time. We had a very positive meeting. Everything was planned out. And I think I had maybe 3 meetings with the sewing girls and such, all with Walt. And that was it. The rest of it I was transferring to them, but I was responsible for everything that was happening. But we didn't have any names as far as president or vice president or the peon or whatever. We were just all by first name, and nobody had any, how would you say, somebody that you had to meet with every other day or every day to see what you were doing. It was done.
well, that was a beautiful way to work. X.
It was lovely.
After 20-some years in animation, Walt brought you over to Imagineering, and it wasn't too long after that he asked you to write a script for the Pirates. But my recollection is you'd never written a script before. Why did he have faith in you to be able to do that?
It was amazing the way Walt was able to find the talents that we had that we didn't know we had. And for instance, when I moved over from animation and into Imagineering, and I wrote a squirrel hat for the first time, and I know this is fun. I like it. And the more I got into it, the more I liked it, because it wound up being that I get a direct command performance from the man himself, who's called me up to his office and say, I want you to do the script for Pirates of the Caribbean. And so I researched what I could, and I learned to say, here you come. That's how the old pirates, And
you're to blame for the fact that we all do that.
I just put on a pirate's hat and said, this is the way I think we should do it, because somebody had done it before, pretty straight, without the hards. And it was pretty dull script.
I didn't do it.
Now you're good. Newspaper stuff.
Tell us about, you also suggested the song, right?
Yeah, after I did the first script on Pirates of the Caribbean, I said to Walt, I think we could use a song here. And I had a melody in mind, and I half recited, half sang it. And he was fine, go ahead. Just get George to do the music for you. George was our musical director, George Bruns.
George Bruns wrote Davy Crockett.
Davy Crockett, yeah. So he did the melody of the Yo-Ho song, and it was an adventure to do the script and the song, and hear people sing, yo-ho, yo-ho, a pirate's life for me. We barely two filled. I thought it would drink up me horny, yo-ho, rod and embezzle and don't give a hoot. Drink up me horny, yo-ho. Last week I couldn't even look for a part, but they kind of separated my vocal cords, and at least I can grow for a little bit. But it was real fun to be able to do a song, and enjoyed it so much. After that, every script I did, I put a song in it.
It was great. And so was the second one, Grim Grinning Ghost.
Right, yeah.
Lots of fun. Well, let's move on. One thing that I always felt, and we've talked about this, all of us, at different times, that Walt was the best casting director that ever came along, putting the right people together to contribute their talents to a project. Do you have a favorite team member or team story as a result of working with people you never expected to, Bob? Or worked with how he put talents together to make something happen?
Well, I always got the impression that Walt sort of was born with an automatic secret weapon, and that he never was interested in what you've done. He was much more interested in what you're going to do next. And I didn't quite understand. I was only 23 when I went over there, so I didn't know how a big company like that would work. But I could see there was this difference, because Walt was not a guy that was what you'd say as a classical company president, that would issue orders, and then the orders would flow down through the layers of management and force all the worker bees in the bottom to do what the big boss said. It was never like that. Walt wandered around and always talked to people, so I saw this thing that it was like the entire Walt Disney Productions lot was a team instead of like conventional teams like today. And he would just wander around and talk to people. I didn't really see what you'd call meetings as such. If 2 or 3 people were standing in the hall, I guess that would be a meeting. It was really very simple. There's nobody doing minutes or typing anything like that. You got to remember, the Xerox machine had not been invented. We didn't have texting. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have any modern tools that got in the way of getting the work done. If you were in a conversation with Walt, like Marty points out, you just remember it because you know that he's remembering it. So there was this ongoing continuity all the time. And I noticed a lot of people caught on to the fact that Walt remembered almost everything he ever heard. Because sometimes somebody would say something, and then a month later they'd say something else, and then Walt would look and he says, well, that's not what you told me last time. So this was sort of a warning thing that said, you better pay attention because you keep your story straight. Well, guess what? This means your creative antenna's up and you learn don't ever lie. Don't ever make up a story because he's going to catch you later at this thing. So you got to understand, it was like the fact that it's almost like management by walking around, and he would as much as he could get out of his office and walk around that back lot all the time, talk to people. He didn't really set an agenda for anything. He just would wander in. Everybody got used to that's the fact of the way it went. But it did something extra. You lost this formality between what somebody would say, the boss Walt Disney and everybody who's working there. Everybody sort of became one. And I noticed that a little bit later on when Walt would deal with corporate presidents and chairmen of the board of very large corporations when we were attempting to sell Epcot, that a lot of people would reproach Walt as Walt Disney, the amazing God, and when they get too close, I even saw the chairman of the board of Westinghouse, his lower lip started to quiver when he got too close to Walt. This was amazing to watch, and then Walt would loosen his tie and make himself look a little bit ratty so that you could actually talk to the guy. The brilliance was, how do you get people to work with you when you are at that kind of beloved stature? He almost had to work at not being Walt Disney so that he could be the team, working with everybody, and people picked that up right away. I think even people that came into the company kind of knew, they kind of picked up that vibrations after a while, and you would never really be nervous in Walt's presence. And then the other little subtle thing he did, which, how many of you saw the Mr. Banks clip yesterday? All right, here's a test. As Miss Travers walked into Walt's office, and the secretary indicated that Walt would be out momentarily and she'd have to wait. Just at the moment of that scene, did you hear anything? Do it again, do it again. The cough. That was his very polite warning that he's coming down the hall. And I thought, that movie picked that part up perfectly. Because he would come down the hall, and you got your door open, and you know, you might be not in the position you want to be in there. And there'd be this little...
That was one of your problems, wasn't it?
But that was so polite, and it was a very subtle thing, and I got the impression he did that deliberately, knowing that he'd be close enough to give you a little warning that he's about ready to pop in your door. So you always had that 5-second warning, and that movie picked that thing up so quickly yesterday. So that was a sample of way more than Walt.
Bob was...
I have to add one thing to that. When they moved the Bambi group into the new studio, they were the first ones to be there, and they were upstairs in Walt's office, and they were all, you know, working on Bambi, and Walt would always come in and see what was going on, and sometimes he wouldn't. And you'd start hearing this voice, Mark said, "Man is in the forest, man is in the forest." And it was Walt coming down the hall. Proper order when he arrived.
That was the password, man is in the forest. But I have to tag on to Bob, too, because I had one of those experiences of, I think I was about 26 years old, and we were in a meeting. Walt asked me a question. I gave him an answer. I went back to my office and looked it up, and I'd given him the wrong answer. And I made the mistake of a young person often makes, and that is that I didn't call him and tell him what the correct answer was. And about a year later, a similar subject came up, and he asked that question, and I responded with the correct answer this time. And he looked at me and he said, "You know, the last time we talked about this, you said," well, I use that in my whole career leading the creative leader of the Imagineering. I said, "Look, you don't have to know all the answers. You're not expected to know all the answers, but find out. And when you find out, make sure you give whoever it was that asked that question the correct answer." Really important in your life. You don't have to know everything. There's no way any of us can know everything. Really important. Tell us about again, I'm going back to casting. Tell us about working on Small World with Mary's sketches and Mark interpreting them in the scenes, and then you doing the costuming. That was pure magic in casting.
It was wonderful. And it was, I went home and shook for about 3 days because Walt always gave you instructions for something which you didn't think you were capable of doing. And you liked him so much and you liked working there so much, you had to force yourself to do that and add a little bit more to it, hopefully. And he was always very kind as long as you were trying. If you weren't trying and goofing off, you had some problems, and you better take care of them real quick. Because he knew everything. He could tell long before, the only way I can do it, to explain it, was when color television came in. Walt immediately said, everything has to be done in color, no more black and white. And the bosses upstairs that were taking care of the money got upset and said, "You don't know what you're doing. You're caught charging a great deal of money for things that we could do in black and white for half the price." And he said, "Yes, but we're going to have a full library of all of our TV shows and everything else in color. And nobody else is going to have it, and they still have the biggest one."
Sure.
He knew way ahead of time what was coming. He was absolutely marvelous to work for and to watch his mind going.
Yes, again, I'm thinking about casting. And if you think about the crew you worked with on the part, Claude Coates and Fred Gerber and all of them, there's so much talent in that group that you had an opportunity to bond with and work with. Mark doing all the comic stuff, the bits of business, and Blaine doing the sculpting. What a crew.
The thing about working on scripts like that, you say they come in from all sides, and I was fortunate to have people like that I didn't know I could do a script, first of all. But the man said, "You're going to write it." He didn't say, "Would you like to?" "You're going to do it." And I said, go back to my office and say, "My God, what we're going to, how do you do this?" sort of thing. And was a wonderful part of my career to have had the chance to come up with things like the Fire and Light, and it seemed to go down in history, and it's a great film.
You're not kidding. I'll applaud that. So why don't we give you guys an opportunity to see what you'd like us to answer any questions about. Can we have the lights up and take some questions from the audience?
Hello? Questions?
Okay. We have some microphones, I hope. Anybody have? Here. Oh,
there's a hand up way out there.
We're just a little early.
Yeah. How many of you partied last night?
Yeah, so if you have a question, come on up to the microphone and we'll take them one at a time. And we'll start over here.
So the question I wanted to ask, when Walt isn't specific with the directions, but rather gives you the liberty to develop the way you want to take it, do you think that helped almost increase the creativity by letting you explore the options instead of, dictating what you should be doing?
No, he never dictated what you shouldn't be doing. Example, it didn't matter whether it was music, art, engineering, model building, or what. But you just have an ongoing project going on, and he'd pop in there, and you were ready for a good attaboy because you just knew you did your absolute best in that drawing or whatever it was. And he'd walk up, and there'd be something on the board, and he'd go, that's kind of interesting, but what if? And he'd make a little suggestion. That was not a criticism. And then you'd think, oh my God, it's so obvious, I missed that. And then he'd come back, a couple of days later, you got it really fixed up, really good now. And he says, yeah, that's kind of interesting, but what if? This was a never-ending thing. There was never any things. And it was constantly urging you on, but never was a criticism thing. A few people got criticism, which were trying to get a little bit too much of their ego, and they didn't get the picture that Walt was the main ego in the whole place. But that's okay, because he's always urging onward these ideas.
Well, I always think that, in fact, the first time I ever saw it written anywhere, it was in National Geographic, and the writer asked Walt what he did. He said, do you draw all the pictures? He said, no, I don't draw anymore. Do you write the scripts? No, I don't write any of the scripts. What do you do, Mr. Disney? And he said, I think of myself as a little bee, and I go around and pollinate things that people are doing. And that was him. That was he had all this creative talent. And as Alice said, he made it so clear to us that whatever we did yesterday was not going to be good enough the next time, because he wasn't going to be there. He was going on, and it better be better because he knew the public expected it. You guys expect it. We do one great attraction, and the next one has to be as great or greater. And all that creative talent, we had a lot of freedom to develop our talent because of working that way.
May I get in here? There's a young, Mark was waiting for Walt. Mark and I were both waiting for Walt because he had something he wanted to say on something we were working on. But this young man came up and he had this one drawing. And he said to Walt, what do you think of this? And Walt looked at it, and he looked over at the young man, and he smiled and he said, it's very difficult to choose between one. He wanted more than one idea. My kid used to come in with a stack of drawings.
Over here.
Thank you, Marty. I would just like to call attention to the dignitaries on the stage to this fact. It's early morning Sunday, and you packed the house.
We're here in Walt's church.
You bet. And I think that's indicative of how much we all love all of you on stage and Walt and the joy you've brought into our lives.
Thank you.
Each of you had many, many wonderful experiences with Mr. Disney. If you could, each of you individually, just tell us, what is that one poignant, heartfelt memory you have of Walt? If somebody says, or that day when you meet him in heaven, you get to say, there was that one moment that you carry in your heart. What is it?
Oh boy, any of you want to take a crack at that?
Walt always figured that you're with him on his ideas. It's like a railroad track. You better be on a parallel railroad track with him. A very simple thing, which I caught on to almost immediately when he got about 30 seconds of dead time. How many guys will act like a used car salesman and they say, did you hear the one about? You know, everybody's going to tell a story. If you did that in front of Walt, within 2 or 3 seconds, that eyebrow started a very slow rise. What that meant was you just signaled to him, you are not thinking in your mind 100% on his project. Don't do that. I never got over that.
You know, I'll answer this way. And I write about this in my book, so you guys have to buy my book. We presented, we developed, we did 2 presentations when Disney went to Florida for the first time, 1965. I wrote both of the presentations, and it was, one script was the only one that I ever did that didn't go to Walt before he saw the finished product. And I don't know why my boss, Card Walker, who was later CEO of Disney, why he decided that it should be done that way, but he did. So he invited Walt and 200 people to a stage to see this presentation which we were going to do in Florida. And it was all about the ABCs of Disney, and it was really about Walt and his career and how great he was, etc. I mean, not those exact words. And when it was over, he came up to me and all he said to me was, I didn't know anyone was writing my obituary.
Whoa.
And I went, but the thing was, he was embarrassed, and because no one had told him, and he hadn't seen the script, even though I recorded about 4 minutes with him in it. He didn't see the total script. I never made that mistake again, even when Mr. Walker ever suggested that I do something like that. I'd say, no, I'm not doing this again. And he didn't change anything. That's the presentation we made in Florida. I think that's enough. We'll move on to over here, another question.
I hope I'm asking the question right, but maybe you already answered it. Would Walt ever give up on somebody? As long as they're trying, would he finally say, you know what, let's move on to somebody else?
No, not actually. Let's say we build something at Disneyland, we think it's going to work, we get it down there, and it doesn't work. It breaks or it just doesn't function right. He was not looking to chop a head or anything or get rid of somebody. He just sort of said, well, okay, well, we'll just find a better way. And it was never done in anger, and was never done in threat. And stop and think of that. If you did something wrong, you were the guy that made the machine and it was bad, you'd live in terror. But the minute Walt says, well, we'll find a better way, you go, am I going to go really fast and find that better way right now? Yeah. He's getting you to contribute onward.
That's amazing.
And Bob designed the bobsleds for the Matterhorn, of course. And I remember the first time, it was still the steel structure was up. It was just the first time I think they ran the vehicles around. And Walt came out and he said, well, who designed this Matterhorn? And Vic Green, an architect, raised his hand. He said, you get in there with the sandbags and let's see if it works. He you didn't have to place any blame if it didn't work, right?
I had an experience with Walt, the art school that I went to. He and Mrs. Chenard were very close, and he came to her. He was going to all the different art schools to see if they would carry him for 2 years, training the young animators that he had to where they would be able to animate real people. And you would feel that they were real people, not a drawing of somebody. And it was for starting up Snow White. And he didn't feel that his animators were trained enough. And he was going to the different art schools, and it was during the Depression, and they say, there's the door. So he came to Mrs. Chenard, and Mrs. Chenard said, I admire what you're doing. You have made an art for the United States. The United States never had an art that would be connected with the United States. It was always Chinese or the early Europeans or something else, but there was no real American art, but the animation was because of what he was doing with it and so on. And she said, you bring your boys down and we'll take care of the price later. And she carried him 2.5 years for free.
Wow.
And they were very close friends after that. And he said he would pay when the film made money. And he not only paid her, but he helped her toward the end when she was losing the school, because everybody went to the war. And her class went, her supply of people in her school were almost 1,000, and it went down to 23.
Well, I apologize for this, but we only have time for one more question over here.
Hello? Okay, I'm a little nervous.
It better be a good question.
That helps. Okay, so Walt Disney World is amazing. We have Epcot, Hollywood Studios. The Imagineers have done so much since losing Walt. But do you ever think about where we would have been if he had stuck around a little bit longer, or if you guys could have been with him to see through Epcot being completed?
Yeah, we probably all think about that. I mean, I certainly do, because I wrote the script for the film about Epcot that he did actually spent. I didn't answer the question about my favorite experience with Walt, but certainly spending 2 long meetings in his office, just the 2 of us, talking about what he wanted to say in that. And then I still have the notes, which are wonderful, 7 or 8 pages of notes, which made it very easy to present. But you know what? He would have made that happen. He definitely would have made that community happen, no question in my mind, because he could go into the boardroom of any company and convince them to be part of it. As Bob mentioned Westinghouse, I was in a meeting with GE, and they would have elected him chairman if he would have been available. Believe me, the World's Fair changed the whole image of GE in the New York area especially. Yeah, he would have made that happen. It would have been exciting. It would have been an exciting run. I mean, none of us can complain about what we did at Walt Disney World. You think about that on a peak day at Walt Disney World today, between the cast members and the public, over 300,000 people on that property. Pretty amazing. The man had a